1800s. She shared her childhood experience in American Indian Stories, the basis for this video.
I remember when my mother first told me the story of how we were forced from our land.
We were driven like a herd of buffalo. We traveled many days and nights. Your sister and uncle were both very sick. With every step, your sister shrieked with the painful jar until she was hoarse with crying. At last, when we reached this western country, on the first weary night your sister died. Soon, your uncle died also, leaving your aunt and cousin alone.
Zitkalasha was just 7 years old when she heard the story of her sister's death. Her family, like many other Native Americans, had been forced onto reservations by the federal government. The Bureau of Indian Affairs established the reservation system in the early 1870s. Its goal was to keep Native Americans out of the way of the westward expansion. The system was failing. Social reformers argued that Native Americans should be assimilated into the mainstream, not isolated from it.
I believe in immersing the Indians in our civilization when we get them, and holding them there until they are thoroughly soaked.
For young Native American children like Zitkalasha, that immersion meant being sent to boarding schools, far from their families and their traditions.
Children should be taken at as early an age as possible, before tribal camp life has made an indelible stamp upon them.
Zitkalasha had heard exciting stories of faraway schools and pleaded with her mother to let her attend. In the spring of 1884, her mother reluctantly agreed. Years later, Zitkalasha wrote about her life at boarding school in a series of articles published in the Atlantic Monthly magazine. She recalled looking forward to traveling east, but her life there was not at all what she had expected.
My friend Judewi and I had anticipated much pleasure from the ride to school, but the throngs of staring palefaces disturbed and troubled us. I sank deep into the corner of my seat, for I resented being watched. Children, who were no larger than I, hung themselves upon the backs of their seats, with their bold white faces toward me, and pointed at my moccasined feet. Tears trickled down my cheeks, and I recalled my mother's words. "You will cry for me, but they will not even soothe you."
A uniform style of clothing for the school should be adopted. 2 plain, substantial suits for each boy, and 3 neat, well-made dresses for each girl.
Late in the morning of my first day at the boarding school, Judewia gave me a terrible warning. The pale-faced woman was talking about cutting our long, heavy hair. Among our people, short hair was worn by mourners, and shingled hair by cowards. I remember being dragged out from underneath the bed. I rebelled. "No, I will not submit." I was carried downstairs and tied fast in a chair. I cried aloud until I felt the cold blades of the scissors against my neck and heard them gnaw off my thick braids. Then I lost my spirit. A loud, clamoring bell awakened us at 6:30 in the cold winter mornings. We tumbled out upon chilly, bare floors into a pale-faced day. We had short time to jump into our shoes and clothes and wet our eyes with icy water before a small handbell was vigorously rung for roll call. We were placed in a line of girls who were marching into the dining room. The annoying clatter of shoes on bare floors gave me no peace. The constant clash of harsh noises with an undercurrent of many voices murmuring an unknown tongue made a bedlam within which I was securely tied.
The school should accustom the pupils to systematic habits. The irregularities of camp life should give way to the methodical regularity of daily routine.
A small bell was tapped, and each of the pupils drew a chair from under the table. Supposing this act meant they were to be seated, I pulled out mine and at once slipped into it from one side. But when I turned my head, I saw that I was the only one seated. Just as I began to rise, a second bell was sounded. All were seated at last, and I had to crawl back into my chair again. I heard a man's voice at one end of the hall, and I looked around to see him. But all the others hung their heads over their plates. I caught the eyes of a pale-faced woman upon me. Immediately, I dropped my eyes. The man ceased his mutterings, and then a third bell was tapped. Everyone began eating. I began crying instead, for by this time I was afraid to venture anything more.
The health of Indian children is a serious matter. It is found that there is an alarming amount of disease among the children. There have been epidemics of measles, scarlet fever, diphtheria, sore eyes.
Once I lost a dear classmate. One morning she could not raise her head from her pillow. At her deathbed, I stood weeping as the pale-faced woman sat near her, moistening the dry lips. I despised the 1 teaspoon which dealt out from a large bottle healing to a row of variously ailing Indian children. I grew bitter and blamed the well-meaning, ignorant woman. The melancholy of those black days has left so long a shadow that it darkens the path of years that have since gone by. After my first 3 years of school, I roamed again in the Western country through 4 strange summers. During this time, I seemed to hang in the heart of chaos, beyond the touch or voice of human aid. My mother had never gone inside of a schoolhouse, and so she was not capable of comforting her daughter who could read and write. Even nature seemed to have no place for me. I was neither a wild Indian nor a tame one. In the process of my education, I had lost all consciousness of the nature world around me. For the white man's papers, I had given up my faith in the Great Spirit. I had forgotten the healing in trees and brooks. And, on account of my mother's simple view of life, I gave her up also. Like a slender tree, I had been uprooted from my mother, nature, and God. Now a cold, bare pole I seemed to be, planted in a strange earth.
Zitkalasha continued her studies at boarding school and went on to college, yet she never lost the feeling of being caught between 2 cultures. During the 1920s and 30s, Zitkalasha became a powerful advocate for Indian rights. She worked to empower Native Americans and preserve the cultural traditions of her elders. Her struggle continues today, as many Native Americans still search for a way to walk in 2 worlds.